Heading into this offseason, I was completely Knicks-pilled. I absolutely loved the way they had built an elite two-way lineup around Jalen Brunson, and that was only enhanced when they traded for Mikal Bridges, then re-signed OG Anunoby, putting together what seemed to be the final pieces of a championship-caliber roster. By that point, I only had one slight concern, and that was how Julius Randle fit into the equation on both ends of the floor. Unfortunately, just a few days after trading for Bridges, they lost Isaiah Hartenstein in free agency, which created a more major concern for me: the depth of their center rotation. Now they were relying on Mitchell Robinson to play heavy minutes without getting hurt, and splitting backup minutes between Precious Achiuwa and Jericho Sims. Not exactly ideal in a conference that features the likes of Joel Embiid and Giannis Antetokounmpo. That takes us to a few days ago, where a report came out that Mitchell Robinson might still be out with injury for another 3 months, turning an already questionable center rotation into pretty easily the worst in the league. So, again, from someone who started out on the Knicks bandwagon, two concerns left a bad taste in my mouth: how Julius Randle fit into their newfound direction, and what in the world they do at the 5. Well, to say they killed two birds with one stone would be an understatement, as they ended up trading Randle for a 7-footer that's coming off a season where he was named to his 4th All-Star team. But many would argue that this move only created even more concern. I talked about this a bit on the Wolves side of things, but Cat's contract situation pretty much handicaps the roster moving forward. He's signed for 3 more seasons, then has a player option in year 4, all while making, on average, $55 million a year. It's pretty clear that they're going all in on this roster, and many question whether or not this actually moves the needle for them as a contender. Well, as things currently stand, with Mitchell Robinson's injury, they're going to rely on Cat pretty heavily to hold things down at the 5. And on offense, that actually could bring them to incredible heights. The reason I questioned the Randle fit is because most of his value comes from his ability to apply pressure as a downhill creator with the ball in his hands. And the direction New York's been heading in is more and more heliocentric, putting the ball in Jalen Brunson's hands for almost the entire game and allowing him to do what he does best. That's, of course, applying downhill pressure himself. Whether it's in transition, in isolation from anywhere on the floor, or in the high pick and roll, Brunson's one of the best in the game at getting into the defense and making plays. The thing is, because he's so good at navigating in traffic and making tough, contested shots, it's never really been a focal point for them to surround him with as much space as possible. They've had some great shooters, notably Dante DiVincenzo, who was a part of the trade, but when you actually dive into some of the lineups they were fielding out, it's clear that 3-point shooting around Brunson wasn't a priority. With a big man rotation consisting of Mitchell Robinson, Isaiah Hartenstein, and Jericho Sims, a floor spacing 5 wasn't really an option. And with Randle playing all of his minutes at the 4, they had a guy who'd at least shoot threes, just not very efficiently. Occasionally, they'd toss out 2 big lineups featuring another non-shooter in Precious Achiuwa, and their go-to guy on the wing, Josh Hart, is a guy that playoff defenses feel more than comfortable leaving open. By now, I think you get the idea, and I'm sure you know what I'm getting at. Most of Cat's value as an offensive player comes from his ability to shoot the absolute lights out of the ball. Over the past 3 seasons, he made over 40% of his catch and shoot threes, and words can't describe how impactful that can be from your center. As a 7-footer with a really quick release, he can shoot over the top of just about any contest or closeout coming his way, which means that he demands constant attention on the perimeter. This has the potential to add so many different wrinkles to New York's offense. For one, I can't wait to see how he operates in the pick and pop with Brunson. Like I said, Brunson's an elite driver, and playing with a pop threat won't only lead to easier lanes for himself, it'll only make the pressure he applies that much tougher to cover, as he's got an outlet at the top of the key. And I actually want to pause on that top of the key comment for a second, because one of the reasons Cat is such a valuable floor spacer is that most of his three-point shooting comes from above the break. A 7-footer sniping at 40% from above the break completely warps the geometry of the court. Most defenses prefer to have their best rim protectors near the baseline, where they can read the play from behind and make an easy rotation to the basket. It's a lot more difficult to rotate from up top or deep on the wing and get to the rim in time without causing a complete collapse. So defenses are going to have to make tough decisions when it comes to matchups, potentially sacrificing paint defense to keep a big on Cat. That then unlocks some versatility when it comes to how you want to set up the rest of the floor. Think about how teams like the Thunder and Celtics take advantage of their stretch fives. They often put one of their guards in the dunker spot as a way to turn that rim protector into a small, which not only makes it easier on the guy driving the ball, it creates more space for corner shooters. I don't know about you, but to me that dunker spot has Josh Hart's name written all over it, as he plays a lot bigger than his size would suggest, especially on the offensive glass. Going back to what I said about corner shooters though, this is where New York's wings come in. Over the last 3 seasons, OG Anunoby attempted 364 corner threes and made a scorching 46.4% of them. As for Mikal Bridges, he attempted 567 corner threes and made an impressive 41.8%. And I actually want to pause right here because I'm not sure everyone quite realizes the magnitude of what this means for the Knicks offense. Like I keep saying, Brunson is one of the best drivers of the basketball this game has to offer. Whether they start a play in early offense, with a high ball screen, or maybe an open side isolation, he's gonna find ways to consistently put pressure on the basket. Last year, he was doing that with a rim protector covering the dunker spot and potentially 2 other limited shooters as kickout options. This year, that starting 5 could wind up with a guard or wing covering the dunker spot, 2 of the best corner three-point shooters in the league, and a 7-foot sniper above the break. The options are endless, and there isn't a defense in existence that can feasibly take all of them away without sacrificing. I think that 5-man unit of Brunson, Hart, Bridges, Anunoby, and Towns will be one of the best offensive lineups in the NBA, just off of that heliocentric approach alone. That's without even getting into some of the other traits that Towns brings to the table. I don't think he's a great post player by any means, but he's got the size and touch to produce offense with his back to the basket, which I think the Knicks can take advantage of a bit, and he's a really good passer from a standstill in these spots, which opens up the potential for some off-ball action or cutting. That passing is actually really important because I think he'll be able to replicate some of what Hartenstein did for them offensively. Let's make one thing very clear. Hartenstein is probably one of the 3 or 4 best playmaking hubs at the 5 in the league. His ability to process the defense, hit tight passing windows on the move, and the way he understands screening angles allowed the Knicks to run a lot of very good offense through him on the perimeter. I'm not saying Towns can do this as effectively, but he at least offers some of it. He too can hit tight windows as a passer on occasion, or set up the 2-man game as a screener, where we already talked about his ability to open up the floor on the pop. But one thing he offers that Hartenstein didn't is much more of a scoring threat. When he has the ball up top, it's impossible to sag off of him and protect passing lanes without giving up a 3, and he's also comfortable turning the corner as a driver himself, so that's another thing the defense has to constantly worry about. All that's to say, there's a very clear pathway to being a top 2 or 3 offense in the NBA next season. They'll obviously run a majority of it through Brunson as a heliocentric creator, which I expect to yield incredible results, but they can also get a bit more creative when needed, whether that's through delay action or entering the ball into the post. The only thing I'm a bit worried about on that end is how the loss of Randall really hurts the non-Brunson minutes. They no longer have that floor-raising type of creator to lead bench units, and with an already thin depth chart, that could create some issues. Knowing Thibs, that starting lineup will probably end up playing 40 minutes a game in the playoffs, but we'll have to see if they can find an answer to those few minutes without their number one guy. Overall though, I feel pretty confident saying that they're heading into this season with a better offense than last year, even with that weaker bench. And I think most people would probably agree. It's the defensive side of things that has everyone worried. Like I said, without Robinson, Towns will be expected to hold down the 5, and while I love what that means for the offense, I can't say I feel the same way about the defense. After the trade for Mikal, I was actually really high on this Knicks team defensively. Two great defenders in Robinson and Hartenstein to rotate in and out in the middle, two remarkable defensive wings in OG and Bridges to handle those responsibilities, along with another wing in Hart who's sort of a jack of all trades. The thing is, when you take those bigs out of the equation, a lot of weaknesses start to fall through. For one, Mikal's best attribute as a defender is his ability to stay attached in pick and roll and smother ball handlers with his length. This is of course maximized when running drop coverage, and unfortunately Cat happens to be one of the worst drop defenders in the league. He doesn't have the foot speed needed to cover all of that space, he's awkward positionally, and he tends to be pretty floor bound, so it's easy to get floaters or lobs over the top of him. That's why in Minnesota, he pretty much never dropped. It was almost always some sort of hedge or trap, bringing Cat up to the level of the screen and relying on the rest of the defense to rotate behind the play. That requires a really high-level defensive unit with multiple rim protectors to work against great offenses, and I'm just not sure the Knicks have it. OG's really the only guy who can consistently make those rotations as the low man and offer a consistent presence at the rim. Hart and Bridges are both better suited on the perimeter, and Brunson's obviously a small guard, so his only option is to try and draw a charge. If you're forced to use OG as a rim protector, that takes away from his best skills as an isolation stopper and switchable forward, so now all of a sudden your two best wings aren't being maximized. Now, I know that sounds really bad, but I also want you to consider the alternative. Precious Achiuwa could help field some awesome defensive units with his own ability to switch. However, you're losing pretty much everything that makes the offense so great. Jericho Sims has the vertical presence that Cat doesn't, but he too struggles with positioning as a drop defender and can't really run any other pick and roll coverage. For all of Cat's flaws, he is still really big, really lengthy, and really strong, which can go a long way. Remember, he's replacing Randall, who simply wasn't anywhere near the rim protector that's required to consistently play the 5. Cat's not great, but he's at least passable and held players below their expected field goal percentage within 6 feet of the basket in every single year of his career except last season. From 2019 to 2021, he was the lone 5 on a putrid defensive unit, yet still produced solid numbers as a rim protector, and that to me bodes pretty well for how he'll look as an interior presence on the Knicks. His best defensive attribute though is of course how good he is in the post, which we saw on the biggest stage against Denver. That's where his size and length are most effective, and considering that they might have to face guys like Embiid, Giannis and Brook, or even Bam, he can be a difference maker. Still, if they want the best possible results as a defense overall, they're gonna need a defensive big like Robinson on the floor. We just saw Cat buy into a role as the 4 in Minnesota next to Gobert, and they had the best defense in the NBA. I think we could see some great results from this strategy in New York, going to a jumbo-sized unit that features Bridges and OG on the wings next to Cat and Mitch in the front court. And that's made possible by what Cat brings on offense as a floor spacer and shooter. If nothing else, lineup flexibility has gone up a ton after this move. They can go with Cat at the 4 or 5, and there was nobody on the roster who could do both consistently, so they were stuck with one look. However, I am a bit worried about their ability to construct championship caliber two-way lineups. I said that I feel that the starting unit with Cat at the 5 has the potential to be one of the best offensive lineups in the NBA. But I don't know if they'd be even an average defense unless Thibodeau finds a way to squeeze more value out of multiple guys. Then I said that the unit with Robinson at the 5 and Cat at the 4 has the potential to be a great defense, but that requires them to sacrifice some of Cat's unique value as a floor spacer and go back to a more traditional look with the interior-oriented big man. Most importantly though, the depth just simply is not there. I like Deuce McBride as a backup guard, but who else can they rely on to play consistent playoff minutes? Cam Payne? Landry Shamet? Precious Achiuwa? This team is essentially a 7-man rotation at best and hinges on multiple injury-prone players remaining perfectly healthy. So as things currently stand, I don't view the Knicks as serious title contenders. I think they can really bother a lot of the top teams in the East though. Milwaukee and Philly immediately come to mind. Both teams run a lot of drop coverage with slower footed bigs, and Cat might just be able to stretch them into oblivion. Both teams also lack competent point of attack defense, so Brunson will have no trouble doing what he does best as an offensive centerpiece. When it comes to Boston though, I just don't see it. The Celtics have so many ways to construct units that are elite on both offense and defense at the same time, while the Knicks don't have that luxury. As for the trade itself, I still view it as a rare win-win though. I went into the Minnesota side of things in my last video, so if you're curious as to why I feel the way I do about them, you should go check that out. On New York's side, the contract situation makes things messy because they're now handicapped on an already thin depth chart. But still, they absolutely had to do something to shore up their center rotation, and they took the best option available. He brings a completely different dynamic to the roster that could result in a deep playoff run, or may just end up hurting them. Who knows? What I do know is that Brunson's going to have probably the best season of his career, the Knicks are going to produce some outlandish offensive numbers, and the Garden is going to love every second of it. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of the Knicks. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.